Our Bible word is Philippians 2 verses 3 to 4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. So Philippians was an epistle written by the Apostle Paul, also from captivity. And again, there were 4 captivity epistles. There's Philemon, there's Ephesians, there's Colossians, and also Philippians. And so the question is, from where? Which imprisonment did Paul write? Perhaps from Ephesus, roughly 54 to 55 AD, or was it from his Roman imprisonment? That's from 60 to 62 AD. And most scholars would say that Philippians, we can date that to Rome, and for various reasons. For example, Paul mentions a praetorium in chapter 1 verses 13, and that could refer to the imperial bodyguard in Rome, because outside of it, it would refer to the main camp in an army camp that's outside of Rome, or it could refer to the residence of a procurator or prefect outside. So maybe some scholars argue, well, maybe Paul wrote it from Caesarea, where he was imprisoned also for about a year or 2. But the distance to travel for the letter carrier back and forth, as we shall see, and news that happened, is too far to go to Caesarea. So we probably have to do here with the imperial bodyguard. And Paul also mentions those from Caesar's household in chapter 4 verses 22. In other words, Christians who were actually working in the imperial service for the emperor himself. And scholars also argue this is maybe written towards the end of Paul's Roman imprisonment, towards the end of that period, 60 to 62 AD. Because at least 4 journeys had to take place between Paul or where Paul was imprisoned, and the people of Philippi. The reason why I say about these journeys back and forth is because there was an Epaphroditus who traveled to Paul in prison, and he took probably some money for Paul to help support him while he's in prison. Remember, at this stage, as a prisoner, the governing authorities didn't worry about giving you food or water or whatever. But Epaphroditus actually arrived at Paul. And so again we must ask, from where did Epaphroditus go? Did he go to Rome? Or did he go to Ephesus? What imprisonment are we dealing here? And most likely it refers to Rome. If we go there, if we read in chapters 4 verses 18, Paul speaks of this gift that were brought by the Philippians. He says, "Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God." So, Epaphroditus, or the Christians in Philippi, heard Paul was in prison. And what happened was, after that, Epaphroditus traveled from Philippi and handed the gift to Paul, as we just read. And then, but Epaphroditus also got sick on his journey. He nearly died. And the news of Epaphroditus' illness reached Philippi. In other words, there's this journey back. And then Epaphroditus learned of the Philippians' deep anxiety over his illness. If you go read there in 2 verses 26. So there must have been at least 4 journeys by the time this epistle was written. Between Philippi to Rome, and then from Rome back to Philippi, and once again. So there had to be these back and forth journeys of news going back and forth. Another reasons to accept that it was Rome it was written from, because a decision was imminent. This was a life and death situation for Paul. If you go there in chapter 1, let's rather go to chapter 2 verses 17. Paul writes there, "Yes, and if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all." Also from chapter 1, Paul writes there. If we read there from verses 19. "As always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit from my labor, yet what I shall choose I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two." So Paul is saying he's in a position, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. He says, I'm happy if I die, because then it's kind of, you'll be with Christ, he writes here. But if he lives on, that will also be good, because then he can carry on to serve as a minister for these Christians in Philippi. And also, what's also happened in Rome is that if this was a life and death situation, there's no mention here of Paul appealing to Caesar, and it also there's back and forth journeys about news about Epaphroditus and them hearing of Paul's imprisonment. It also makes sense if Paul was a long period, this 2-year period, towards the end of it in Rome when he was under house arrest there. And also Paul was free to preach. Paul actually writes there that there was extensive opportunity to preach the gospel. If you go there, chapter 1, verses 14 to 17. And that corresponds to what Luke describes in Acts 28, verses 17 to 31. Paul was free to receive people, also to write letters, also for people to send out on missionary or mission work, etc. So there are several reasons why Rome is a very good option for this letter, or as the place of origin for this letter. Paul had a very warm relationship with the Philippians. They always supported him. They always came to his help. Like, with Epaphroditus, who sent this gift to Paul. And also during Paul's crisis with the Corinthian Christians. You go read there in 2 Corinthians, how he writes about how the Philippians have helped him with a collection for the saints of Jerusalem and their generosity, etc. And Paul visited the Philippians on a number of occasions, also during his 3rd missionary journey. So, why did Paul write? Well, he's now sending Epaphroditus back. Epaphroditus brought the gift. He got very ill, but he made it, he survived, and it also provides an opportunity for him to carry the letter. And Paul also expresses his thankfulness for the support of the Philippians. And also because Epaphroditus had fallen ill, he wants to send him back as soon as possible, also that he can get home, and also knowing that he's in good health. Now, of course, Philippians were concerned of Paul's welfare. They know he was imprisoned, he was in trial, and Paul wants to let them know about his present situation. Another purpose is that there were Jewish missionaries who came there, and Paul attacks them very strongly if you go there in chapter 3, because they believed in circumcision and etc. And Paul also warns these Christians, beware of these Jewish missionaries, that they not corrupt the gospel. And so he also writes this letter to give them exhortation. Specifically, we have this exhortation in chapter 1 verses 27 to 2 verses 18, because it appears there were internal rivalries and disputes, not massive, but there's something's going on there, and Paul just addresses it. And there's also opposition from enemies. If you go there, chapter 1 verses 27 to 28. So Paul exhorts them, remain united, stand united in the face of all this opposition, and have courage, and also stand united in the face of these Jewish missionaries who want to come here and upset the gospel, etc. So this is Paul, probably in Rome, and from Philippi, Epaphroditus brought him a gift from the Philippian Christians, And now after quite a long period, it would seem, he's now sending Epaphroditus back with news of his status or where he is in his imprisonment, and also to warn them against these other Jewish missionaries, and also for Epaphroditus to return home, and also to be in a state of health, and above all also to remain united. Live as Christians have been called to live. So now our Bible word forms part of a long exhortation. We find that in chapter 1 verses 27 to 2 to verse 18. It's about conduct worthy of the gospel. And it begins with this word, only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, etc. But it's about conduct worthy of the gospel. In the face of opposition, there first verses 27 to 29, this is opposition from outsiders in Philippi, who is harassing and persecuting these Christians. And now Paul addresses also this hint of internal divisions, and that's our immediate textual unit. That's chapter 2 verses 1 to 4. That's a call for unity and mutual consideration. But that's an extension of this, that your conduct be worthy of the gospel. And let's go to verses 1. Therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy. So if there's any of these things, actually they are there. That's the implication. That's what Paul is writing. Because this is what the Christians have already experienced. This is what they have already received from God through Christ. Are all these things. Consolation, comfort, fellowship of the Spirit, affection, mercy. It's there. Okay? And in verse 2, Paul writes, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. So they will make Paul's joy complete, and also they must share one intent and disposition. They must share the same goal, the same love, the same spirit. So this is plea for unity. Now we come to our Bible word. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interests of others. So this unity will be achieved if we esteem each other better than ourselves. So again, it's about exercising humility. It's the opposition or the opposite of this selfish ambition and conceit. So there might also be a hint of class divisions here, class awareness. Because Philippi, there was also this kind of a very strong Roman city. There also might have been this strong social awareness or class consciousness amongst the people. And Paul also probably wants to get rid of that. So, but unity, let's get rid of selfishness, selfish ambition, and conceit. Rather exercise humility. And also we must not have our own interests at heart, also the interests of others. So again, Paul's just following here the example of Christ. Because after this, we find the Christ hymn. That is from verses 5 to 11, where this is Christ hymn. It was probably a hymn sung in the early churches that explains the nature of Jesus, that he's the supreme example of humility. Because Jesus lowered himself. He took the form of a slave. He served others. He emptied himself. He served other people. And this is also as admonished in our Bible word today. Also, don't only look out after your own interests, but also at the interests of others, like Christ did. He did not cling on to his high position. Also, in verses 3, let's go back to that, where he says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. This is something similar to what Christ did. He lived for the benefit of others. He was a servant among servants. He did not come to be a boss and to boss people around or to oppress them or whatever, or to think that he's more worthy of more or whatever. Christ came to serve. And that's also the message here. Come together in unity. Get rid of selfish ambition and conceit. Let us exercise humility. Because humility, this mutual esteem we have with one another, this is what will bring us together.